The Fuji X-Pro1 is a 10-year-old camera that was once Fuji's top-of-the-line model. But does it still hold up in 2021? The Fuji X-Pro1 is a 16-megapixel rangefinder camera with interchangeable lenses that was initially released in March of 2012. That means the camera is almost 10 years old. It has a shutter speed dial, and lenses have an aperture ring and a manual focus ring. The camera also has an optical viewfinder that you can use either optically or as an EVF. Now, I purchased my X-Pro1 about 5 years ago, really to use as a family camera, although I have done some professional shoots with it as well. And in today's video, I'm going to give you some of the pros and the cons of the camera, and also let you know if I think it's worth buying one of these 10-year-old digital cameras in 2021. Really, the biggest joy in using this camera is the ability to shoot with it without looking down from the viewfinder. It feels like an old SLR or rangefinder camera, and you can use your hands without putting the camera away from your eye to change your aperture and your shutter speed, and it just feels right. So if you come from the old school like me of shooting film cameras, you will immediately feel right at home with this camera. And it feels incredibly sturdy, along with the prime lens that I have on here, the 35 1.4. It just feels right. It doesn't feel cumbersome, it doesn't feel overly heavy, but it's certainly not cheap. You can tell it's very well made. Shooting manually, which is what I prefer to do, I don't think there's a better camera that I've used that feels better than this particular one. Now, the image quality in this camera is just awesome. Even in 2021, almost 2022, it holds up quite well. So I don't think you're gonna have any problems if you're looking for a good camera that can create great images. One of my favorite ways to shoot with this camera is actually to shoot in the monochrome setting and shoot JPEGs and RAWs together. The quality of these JPEGs right out of the camera is just awesome. And I love it because when I'm shooting family photos, I don't want to have to spend forever converting everything from RAW and then editing it in Affinity or in Photoshop or Lightroom. So being able to just get these awesome JPEGs right out of the camera is so fun for me, and it makes my life so much easier, and I can just share them. Now, one of the novelties of this camera at the time, which Fuji still has in its X-Pro series cameras, is the ability to use an optical viewfinder or an EVF. The EVF in this camera for a 10-year-old camera is actually very good. The optical viewfinder, however, although it's kind of a cool idea, I never ever use. And the reason why is because I'm not sure if anything's going to be in focus when I do that. But the problem with the optical viewfinder is I don't know if I've locked onto the subject. Even though it should change green, the square in the viewfinder, sometimes it does and it's not in focus. Sometimes it focuses on the wrong thing. So I really don't use the optical viewfinder at all. I don't think it's a great way of using this camera. I think it's really a gimmick, at least on this camera. I'm sure it's much better in the newer cameras, but on this one, I would say if you're gonna get an X-Pro1, don't even think of that as an option. You're probably not gonna use it. Now let's talk about the menus and the buttons on the camera. Now, I've already mentioned that the shutter speed dial, the aperture ring, these are awesome. I love these dials. Very intuitive. You can just pick it up and use it. It's not gonna feel at all confusing. However, the menu is not very good at all. Even the quick menu on this camera I find to be confusing. Even after all this time of shooting with this camera, I still have to think sometimes when I'm looking for a menu item, and it's just not great. And 9 times out of 10 I am using the quick menu, but it just doesn't feel intuitive. The worst button on the camera, or the worst dial I should say, is this exposure compensation dial, and it's just terrible. If you're walking around with the camera on a strap and say it's next to you here, you're going to accidentally move that exposure compensation dial. It does not have a lock. It's always moving back and forth, and it's probably the worst design part of the camera. From the time this camera was released, the autofocus was never great. When I got it, I downloaded the latest autofocus firmware upgrade, which did make a big difference in the focusing. So here's what I'll say about the autofocus. If you're in an ideal situation, you have plenty of light, you have plenty of contrast, the focus system is good. It's not terrible, it's not great. It's good. But if you're shooting in a less than ideal situation, it's going to be tough. So I'll give you, for example, I had shot some concert photography, and shooting the stage where there was plenty of contrast and light on the performers, the photos came out okay. It wasn't terrible to use the camera in that regard. I was able to get the shots that I wanted. It hunted a little bit and kind of went in and out with the focusing a little bit, but it wasn't terrible. But the minute I tried to shoot something in the audience where it was a little darker, there wasn't as much contrast, it was almost impossible to focus. So it was very frustrating in that regard. So if you shoot a lot of low light, low contrast scenes, this might not be the camera for you. But overall, I gotta say the autofocus is okay, and even it surprises me sometimes how accurate it is. All right, so now we come to the heart of the matter at hand. Is it worth it to buy a Fuji X-Pro1 in 2021? Well, in my humble opinion, the answer is yes. Now, here's how I'm coming to that conclusion. First of all, you can find these used for somewhere around $400 on eBay. It's a great deal for an awesome camera like this, which is really a premium quality item made to professional standards. The image quality rocks. The images are awesome. They hold up so well even in 2021. So that's a huge plus. The autofocus is good even in 2021. It works well. The camera is almost perfect ergonomically. It's made beautifully. It looks beautiful. It feels right in the hands. It's premium materials, and it's just a beautiful piece of art to behold as well. And finally, it's just a total joy to use. It's the closest thing that I've had to shooting with a film camera. And I love shooting with this camera. I love taking it with me on the road. It's small, it's light, it's easy to carry around. It is not obtrusive at all. And I think it's a great camera even in 2021, almost 2022. Well, there you have it. That's my opinion, and I'm sure there's plenty of you out there who probably disagree with me. So if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, let me know, leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your opinion. So if you enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor and just like, comment, share it, and please subscribe to my channel. Let me know what you thought of the video, and if there's anything particular you'd like me to talk about, I'd love to hear it. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.